Welcome back. As you know, I am Eli, the computer guy, and today we are going to be talking about how to deal with imposter syndrome in the tech industry. So, if you don't know what imposter syndrome is, you obviously are not in the tech industry. Everybody in the tech industry at one point in time will feel imposter syndrome, all the way from the help desk employees all the way to the CIOs. There is going to be a time when you're going to be sitting there and asking yourself, how the hell did I get this job? Obviously, I am not qualified to do what I've been asked to do. Everybody else is so much smarter than me, and I'm an imposter, right? That's the idea with the imposter syndrome, is you don't feel like you should be there. For some reason, you came in through the back door or something like that, and you're really scared that somebody's going to realize that basically you're not up to snuff compared to all of the other employees, and all hell is going to break loose. And so, of course, we're going to start this video the way I start all of these kinds of videos, where basically one of the first things you have to deal with when you're dealing with imposter syndrome is ask yourself, well, do you actually have a point? Do you have imposter syndrome? Or are you in fact an imposter? Again, and I'm not actually saying this from a moral or ethical standpoint. You do you, but please realize you can lie to everybody else in the world, but do not lie to yourself. At the moment you start lying to yourself, everything is going to go to hell. And so one of the interesting things I see with a lot of people that have imposter syndrome is they don't have a syndrome. They actually are imposters. And what do I mean by this? No, Eli, you're not supposed to say that. But think about it, right? You go into a job interview and you pad your resume, right? You say you know relational databases. You say you know a SQL. And the reality is, like, I don't know, you watched a YouTube video on SQL like 4 years ago, so you quote unquote know it. Or again, being a hiring person, right? You sit there and you see these resumes with just these lists, just lists of skills. And it's like, again, it goes back to that whole thing. Is this a skill that you can do blindfolded and half drunk? Or is this, some configuration that you did 2 years ago? And so now you're plugging it in on the resume. When you went through the interview, right? When you went through the interview process and people asked you about these skills and whether you were actually up to snuff, were you honest about it, or did you shine that turd to a mirror polish so that basically you said the right things even though you weren't necessarily sure what it was you were saying? It's like, I know these words should go together. Okay, with this technology uses these buzzwords. So I'm going to say a lot of these buzzwords, and right, hopefully I will get a job. It's one of the most amazing things. Again, actually having hired people, actually having employees. It's amazing how many times employees, like, there's this weird, again, it's that lizard brain thing that happens in the head where, like, so many times people get so focused on trying to get quote unquote the job. They forget to ask themselves if they actually want the job that they're going for. I really need a job. Yes, but do you want this job? And so again, by hook or by crook or whatever else, many times you get people into a position where they are quite literally not qualified for the job they're in. Or again, you deal with recruiters. Again, our industry needs all types. One of the types I'm not sure we need, but we got them, is recruiters. And again, remember, recruiters get paid a quarter of your yearly salary once your ass is in a seat for something like 6 months, right? So basically, this is one of the problems you have, like the old story about basically, having a JavaScript developer or a Java developer, and they get slammed into a job where they need the other one. It's like, right? Basically, it's like, okay, I'm a highly qualified JavaScript developer, and then the recruiter gets you into the job. Everything seems great. They plunk you in the seat, and then they're like, okay, here's our legacy Java code. And you're like, yeah, no, I know JavaScript. I don't know Java. And basically, the recruiter didn't know the difference, right? JavaScript must just be a smaller version of Java, right? And the HR people, they don't know what the hell's going on. And let's be honest, the head of IT or the head of systems or whatever for the company, they probably had more important things to do than verify you actually knew the language that they thought you were supposed to know. And so you get put into this position. And again, you may actually know JavaScript or Java or whatever else, but you don't know the skill set that the company actually needs. If you sit there and you're like, oh my God, right? You have this imposter. I'm an imposter, right? You have like, you're never going to get to the point where you're actually just going to be able to sit down and figure out what it is that you do actually need to know, right? The way to get yourself out of the feeling of you being an imposter is you by actually getting comfortable with the job, with the tasks that you're required to do, and feeling like you actually belong, right? So the people with imposter syndrome, like the people that actually have imposter syndrome, they need an ego boost, right? They need an ego boost. They need some motivation. They need to like dive into the code and start doing a little work and proving to themselves that they actually belong there, right? So if you have a JavaScript shop and you are a JavaScript developer, and you go there and you feel like everybody else is so much smarter, but it's simply because they know the legacy code base, they know the styling for the company, they know the naming conventions and all that kind of stuff. So you're like, you know JavaScript, you know the language, but there's all this additional crap that goes into actually building things. You're not comfortable with that, right? Diving into the real work will make you feel more comfortable, and that's good for people that actually have imposter syndrome to make them feel like they should be there. Here's the thing with the real imposters, with the real imposter, don't dive into the real work. Don't dive into the real work. You need to go, and there's these things called Udemy, or Udacity, or Codecademy, or any number of other places that you can go, basically to get the core competencies that are required to actually know what the hell you're supposed to be doing with the code, right? Because that's the thing. Either you're an idiot, or you're trained in a different skill set. If you try to actually dive in and do complicated tasks without knowing what's going on, you're most likely going to mess things up pretty badly. Then everything really is going to go to hell. If you know you're an imposter, if you know you're honest with yourself, I shouldn't be here. Well, the first thing that you should do is you should get qualified to the point that you should be there, right? Okay, this is a shop that does Java development. I'm going to sit here for the next month. I'm going to go to work every day. I'm going to learn as much as possible at work. And then I'm going to go home and I'm going to hammer out and learn how to do all this Java or whatever the technology is at home. And then in a month or two, as I'm going through the learning, the onboarding process anyway, hopefully I will be able to get up to snuff so that I can actually start, providing value to the company and providing value to the team and go from there. And so it's very important to be thinking about this because that's the thing, right? We are the heroes in our own stories, right? We want to think that we're the good people. Yeah, many times we're not. Here's the thing. Many times we're the bastards. Who's the bastard? Oh, me, right? And so if you're honest with yourself about that, it's much easier to figure out basically what you should do to actually be able to get up to speed and figure out where you need to go into the future. So the first thing with imposter syndrome is to figure out, do you actually have syndrome? You should be there. You just don't feel like you should. Or, yeah, no. Did you get the job illegitimately somehow, whether or not it was technically your fault? The next thing to think about with imposter syndrome is simply to remember that you can't know everything. It's hilarious, right? I've been doing tech education now since 2009, and some of my viewers are like, I want to be like you, Eli, and know everything. Oh, my friend. Oh, my friend. I do not know everything. I do not know close to everything. And let's be honest with you, the amount of stuff and the range of things that I do know, you probably don't actually want that as a career. Again, I'm a technology professional from a different age. Things were much different back in the 2000 time frame when I got into tech. But I think a big thing to just remember is that you can't know everything. So a lot of times when people get imposter syndrome, it's because they get into a situation where they're dealing with a new set of technologies or whatever, and all of a sudden they no longer feel comfortable, right? They've always been doing things a certain way, JavaScript or Python or sysadmin work back in the old days or whatever else. And basically, and they were very, very, very comfortable with that. Again, think about this. So I was in MCSE back for NT 4.0, and for us, we didn't need to know command line. There is a beautiful time. There was a time in this world where you could make a lot of money as a technology professional, and you just simply right clicked, left clicked your way through life, right? Those are beautiful times. Things move along. Now, in the modern world, you really do need to know command line, and you need to know to be able to script in order to be able to deploy servers. Instead of one sysadmin dealing with 5 or 10 servers, you can now have one sysadmin dealing with 500 or 1,000 servers if you're using Ansible, Puppet, Chef, those type of things. But here's the deal. Here's the deal. When you're dealing with Puppet or Chef or Ansible, that is an entirely different skill set than right clicking and left clicking, right? Hey, you can do it. You can do it. You will figure out how to do it if you just sit down there and go through the steps and actually learn how to do it. But when you initially get into that place, into that position, when you're having to do that type of work, it is going to feel like you're an imposter, right? You're this 40-year-old, you've been doing really good with your career, and now all of a sudden, the 20-year-olds are just knocking all this work out with all this things in the programming system administration world, and now you feel old and you feel like you can't keep up because, oh no, right, the kids know how to do it and I am completely lost. The important thing to realize, though, again, in the technology industry is things change. Again, it's hilarious. Oh, I can't wait. The millennials are about to get punched in the nuts. I love it, right? So again, for me, I started in the Army electronics in 96, got my MCSE in 2000, been plugging along. Here's the thing, right? The world of tech has changed every couple of years for the past almost 3 decades. Again, when I'm recording this, it's 2024. I started in the Army in 1996, literally been doing this crap for almost 30 years, which sounds really weird even when I say it. But here's the thing, things change, right? In 96, electronics were really important. Then computers and networking became really important. Then as things went on, we got more IoT and we got more mobile devices and we got broadband. And basically, the skill sets that were required to keep up, to continue to be a technology professional, right? They kept changing and changing and changing and changing and changing. What's interesting, though, is if you get a technology professional that started in the 2010s, right, they may have gotten into the world, especially if you got into JavaScript. If you were smart or lucky in like 2013 and started working on JavaScript, you may have been in your own little world for a decade now, right? You learn the JavaScript and then React and then Node, and everything's basically staying more or less within the same technology framework, that type of thing. And you felt very comfortable and you felt very cool and you felt very powerful. And what's funny, what's interesting, right? AI is coming out. And here are all the millennials. Oh, the millennials are crying. The millennials are crying. The millennials are screaming, right? AI is gonna take technology jobs. And I sit back and go like, well, yeah, AI is the latest product to take technology jobs, and that's how it works. Again, when I went to AIT, the advanced training in the Army for my MOS specialty, the year before, there had been two MOSs. One had been like 29 weeks of training. The other had been like 32 weeks of training. Literally, they had combined those together for my training program into like 33 weeks of training. Apparently, 2 years after I graduated, they had combined that into even more. And that's the interesting thing. All the way back in the 90s, there is massive consolidation in the tech industry. People just didn't realize because the tech industry was also growing massively at the same time. Again, if you look at the sysadmin world nowadays with things like Ansible, I mean, you have to understand remote administration. Oh my golly, back when I worked in the corporate world, again, back in like 2000, 2001, we had something called SMS, which was called Systems Management Server. It was from Microsoft, not text messages, SMS. But basically, we had a T1 line. So we had an office with 100 people with a 1.544 connection that got chopped up to actually have telephone lines coming out of it too. So I'm not even sure. We had like a 1 megabit connection. For me to remotely administer servers. So I had 10 offices throughout the Northeast region that I had to administer. In order to remotely administer those servers, I would sit down, SMS would pop up. It would then remote in to that remote server, and then just misery would ensue. You like move the mouse, and then you wait 6 seconds. Make sure the mouse is over the icon, and you right click, and you wait 5 seconds, and then you click something, and then you wait 20 seconds. Literally, this is not a joke. This is not a joke. There were times when I decided to hop on an airplane because although I had this thing called SMS, it was literally easier to hop on an airplane, go to the site, fix the damn problem with the server, and hop back on an airplane and come home. That wasn't because I wanted air miles. It was just because I wanted to keep a couple of my brain cells, right? So think about that. For me, back then, when you were in that world where you had Windows 95, it was just crapping the bed because you looked at it wrong. Again, we had secretaries that would install the dancing baby or the dancing everything else. There were all the kinds of dancing crap that they put onto their Windows 95 machines, and it would kill the Windows 95 machine. And then I had to repair that. If you installed AOL back in 2000, it shut off all of your other network connections. And of course, everybody needed their AIM back then, and so they would install AOL, and we have computers drop off the network. And it was a complete and utter misery, right? Doing that kind of work now, it doesn't even matter. I went to, so one of my sponsors, I had a sponsor, I think they had 500. They'd be like 500, 600 employees. So I went to their offices and they showed me their help desk. So they had like 2 people, their quote unquote help desk for 500 employees. And this was like 7, 8 years ago, 500 employees. And they're like, oh, okay, this is help desk. And then me being me, I was like, so where are the desktop support technicians? And they're like, you're seeing it. It's a help desk. Literally, they had 500 employees and 2 quote unquote help desk technicians in order to support all of them. And things had changed so massively within a relatively short period of time. And now, again, technicians can support lots and lots and lots of people. And so the important thing to be thinking about, like there's a lot of folks out there, again, with AI or whatever else, they're like, tech jobs are gonna disappear. No, kids, tech jobs are gonna change, just like they've been changing for the past 100 years. You've just been through a nice period of everything staying relatively the same. And so an important thing to be thinking about, right, if you're a technology professional, especially if you've got a skill set and all that, if you go to a new company or if your company starts to do a massive migration or whatever, the reality is that you may not be qualified, you may not be up to snuff with the technologies that they're currently using. And so you are going to feel out of place. I think about this with Fireship. I think one of the times I started losing my mind about the tech industry. So Fireship is a YouTube channel, does all kinds of different videos on tech. Really good channel. Go subscribe. But basically, he did like a video of the 30 most popular database systems, and I was just like, what? I mean, again, back in the day, you had MySQL, or you had Oracle, or you had MS SQL, and that was about it. Then you got the NoSQL flavors, and then you got some Amazon and some whatever stuff. But it was all pretty. Like, you needed a database. Not that long ago, if you needed a database, it was pretty easy to figure out what database that you're going to use, and learning how to use it was relatively simple. Now Fireship can do a video. 30 of the most popular. This isn't all the database systems out there anymore. This is just 30 of the most popular database systems. And so one of the big things that you need to be thinking about, especially in the modern world of interoperability, again, we talk about service-oriented architecture. The idea is that we're dividing all of these services into their own systems, and then the code is interacting with that basically API or that type of thing, instead of it all being one big mass. And so one of the things that you need to be thinking about is that you may go into a job where you are not going to know something, and this is going to be a very, very, very normal thing, right? You are going to be tasked with work that is going to be outside of the skill set that you're comfortable with, and you're basically just going to have to suck it up and drive on. And sitting there and feeling like you've got this imposter syndrome really isn't going to help anything. Again, realize that you're an imposter. This is what my skill set is good in. I have been tasked with something. I have no freaking clue how this works. And so I am going to accept that and learn from the 20-year-olds and learn from people that may be junior from a career standpoint, but senior to you in whatever particular skill set that you're currently working with. And so I think this is really like an important thing to consider because, again, so many times we just get so used to our environments and then we go to the new environment. And again, they have different styles, they have different naming conventions, they have different infrastructure, they use different databases, they do a whole bunch of things. And again, can get very easy to feel like, oh, I don't belong here. Where it's like, no, you just need to get up to speed on the technology, and again, be honest with yourself that that's what needs to happen. Now, on that basic concept is you do need to be thinking about how you can add continuous learning into basically your professional development. Again, one of the big problems I see in the modern world of technology is that people learn a particular skill set, they get very comfortable in that particular skill set, and they stop. And they stop. Right? The thing is, again, technology is always changing. Just because your legacy infrastructure is not always changing does not mean the industry doesn't always change, right? That's one of the big problems you can run into is basically you can have somebody that's been dealing with legacy infrastructure for 10 or 15 or 20 years, and so they feel like hot crap all the way until their legacy infrastructure goes on the scrap heap and some new system comes in. One of the big problems that you can have is that basically people stop learning. So again, with this whole thing, when I talk about things like NoSQL, when I talk about things like SQLite and these IoT, AI, these types of things, one of the things to make it so that you don't feel like you have imposter syndrome in the modern world when you get put into situations where you're not fully up to speed is if you're constantly learning about products, if you're constantly learning about technologies, if you're constantly building things on the side, you most likely will not be caught totally unawares of the new technology. Like, oh, I don't fully understand how to do configurations on this technology, but I get the concept, so I feel pretty comfortable. I can get up to speed quickly. One of the things that I talk about to new people trying to get in the tech industry is that you always need to be building something, right? Experience, experience, experience. The only thing that really matters in this industry is experience. And again, if you're doing sysadmin work, honestly, whether you fix your grandmother's computer or the CEO's computer, computers are basically computers, right? A RAM chip is a RAM chip. If you slot it into your grandmother's computer, it's the same as slotting it into the CEO's computer. And people aren't getting paid for RAM chips anymore, right? But that was an idea, right? Teaching people or telling people you need to go out there and you need to be doing work. Again, if you're doing the computer repair things, cleaning viruses up on your mom's computer and your dad's computer and your friend's computer and the church's computer or the temple's computer and the nonprofit's computer, right? Doing that work, fixing computers is simply fixing computers, right? The same thing is true with code, right? If you're going to be dealing with the SQL databases or NoSQL databases, you're going to be dealing with Python or Node or JavaScript or whatever else. The code is the code. If you do projects on your own, you might get into a few bad habits, right, with styling or whatever else. Look at the code that I show you folks, right? But here's the thing. If you do it, functions work the same way. If you're doing a hobby project and you're creating functions and doing API calls, those functions and those API calls are going to work the exact same if you're doing something in the corporate world. And so one of the big things that I've noticed is a lot of technology professionals at this point don't seem to go home and play anymore. And yeah, I'm just putting this out there just as somebody that's done this again almost for 30 years. And it's a bit frustrating. Maybe it's Asheville. Maybe it's Asheville. I don't know. I don't see a lot of people playing anymore. Like when I had employees, right? I'd have employees and they'd be there for 8 to 10 hours, and then they would run into a problem with something that we were doing, and literally I'd walk in the morning and I'd have one of my employees say, "Yeah, I spun up a server last night. I installed this software. I do these configurations, and I figured out what was happening." Right? They left work and they went home and they played. And in that playing is learning how to do configurations and all that kind of thing. And so one of the things that you need to be thinking about as an actual professional, again, you might be a senior, it might be a senior level, right? And I don't know, Android or iOS or whatever it is, is to think about actually going out and start to build projects in other things so that you understand how that technology works, how that code works, how all of that goes together. Because again, different technologies are very different. Again, even in the coding world, just because you know coding, syntax between languages is different. How these programming languages work, what problems that they're trying to solve are massively different. So if you hear about Rust, right? I was like, Rust is amazing. So you might be an iOS developer or whatever else. Just spend an hour or two a week playing with Rust. One, you might find that you like it and you might want to go in that direction. Or two, in the future, when the boss says, hey, we've got this Rust project, you at least know what the hell's going on, and so that you don't feel out of your depth. So one of the big things with imposter syndrome, again, as an actual professional, not just a noob down in the help desk, is making sure you keep up with your professional development so that things don't come at you from right field. Now, the next thing to be thinking about, this whole idea of imposter syndrome, is just remember that possibly not the best of humanity becomes technology professionals. I know this might come as a shock, but people that like to be shut away in server rooms or sit there coding for 10 or 12 hours a day might not be the best folks with interacting with other human beings. And when you have a company of these people or an organization of these people, stupidity can ensue. One of the big issues that you run into in the technology industry is many times people decided to become technology professionals because their moms thought that they were really smart like 20 years ago, right? Because there's this weird thing with technology. If you could figure out how to program the time on a VCR, if you're that old, people are like, "Oh my God, they're so smart." If you knew how to Google, I remember when boomers were impressed with folks who knew how to Google, right? Oh my golly, they can Google, or they can slot in a RAM chip or whatever else, right? One of the interesting things with our profession is that a lot of the work that we do is actually stupidly simple. Again, I remember back in the 90s, I had a buddy of mine in the 90s making over $100,000 a year simply assembling computers. He would simply assemble a computer, install a pirated operating system on it, sell it, and as a 19-year-old, he was making over $100,000 a year. And again, that was almost 30 years ago when he was doing it, right? People are like, "Oh my God, he's so smart." And again, even by the 90s, all the connectors had been properly keyed and all that kind of thing. So we weren't blowing anything up anymore. It was really easy to assemble a computer. So one of the problems that we get to in our field is we have a lot of people that got in this field because they want to feel smart, right? And they want their ego padded. And they were told that they were smart because they knew how to use Google or slap in a RAM chip or whatever years ago. And so ego is a huge issue for them. And so one of the big things is they want to feel like they are the smartest. They want to feel like they are superior, which can be a complete disaster when you have people with imposter syndrome. So I've seen this. I have seen this with highly, highly qualified technology professionals that go into an environment where they feel a little bit uncomfortable, and just junior level pieces of crap are lording over them. I had that. One of my old employees actually. Again, I'm like, I don't know, geeks come to me for some reason. It's weird. Anyways, this guy was amazing. He had his master's degree in engineering from Johns Hopkins. He had dealt with computer programming computer systems for let's just say very, very real time scenarios. He had been in a particular sector of our industry that was very nuanced or very, very niche, I suppose, with embedded systems and that type of thing. And what was interesting, he got out of that, wanted to go into the more normal corporate world. And I remember when he was awed by the Ruby on Rails developers. Oh, that was a very hard conversation. He's like, Eli, I'm just not as smart as those people. Ah, yes, you are. That is adorable, right? But that was the thing. I was like, oh my God, like, I don't know Ruby on Rails, right? It was web development. Web development isn't embedded systems. Master's degree, many years of professional experience. He was just trying to transition into this world. And he was just bowled over by people who had started learning Ruby on Rails about 4 months ago, right? And one of the big problems that you can have is a lot of these people learning Ruby on Rails or whatever else are like, yes, I am smart, because this is what their entire ego is. Again, think about with this modern world, and I'm not being snarky towards the young people. All right, young people aren't getting married. Young people are disconnected from communities in ways that we weren't before, not going to church or temple or other social groups, most likely don't have strong familial bonds in many ways, and many times aren't going out to do interesting things in the world, hike the Himalayas or do the crap that I used to do back when I was young, right? All, and I do mean all they have in their life is the belief that they're superior because they know some crappy ass language that a jackass could learn in about 6 months if they wanted to, right? And so one of the problems that you run into is if you go into this world, believe me, everybody else around you will agree that you're an imposter and you should kiss their boots, right? And so this is something to be careful about. With a lot of the people around you, they're not going to be honest with you. They're not necessarily going to say, "Look, you're good at this skill set. You got to learn a couple of big other things. It's no big deal." Right? A lot of people go, "Oh, that's hard. Oh, that's don't know if you're gonna be able to do that." And again, that's oh my God, if you've got that imposter syndrome. And so one of the things just to realize is if you feel like you have an imposter syndrome, it's not simply that you're honest with yourself that you may be an imposter, but it's that you realize everybody else around you might be an imposter too. So kind of take what they say with a wee bit of a grain of salt. I know this from actually running a company, and again, I know lots of CEOs and all that kind of thing. One of the big problems you can have, especially in leadership positions, is sometimes you can be barely treading water. Right? You're just dog paddling away and you think you're going to drown, right? Because again, especially people in leadership positions or business owners, you've got funding to worry about, and you've got customers to worry about, and you've got competitors to worry about, and you have employees that want to protest your company as they get paid on the company time to worry about. You've got all this stuff to worry about, right? But here's the thing, people look up to the leader, right? As long as there is confidence in the leader, as long as there is trust in the leader, as long as there's at least respect in the leader, the whole organization can keep moving. As soon as people lose that for the leader, everything can kind of go to hell, right? If people no longer are willing to do basically what the leader says or do the guidance of the leader, the entire thing can go to hell. So one of the big problems that you have many times is that, yes, the people that are in your leadership position that are above you, many times they don't just have imposter syndrome. Again, they are basically imposters at this point in time, and they are just trying to dog paddle their ass to shore to do whatever needs to be done, right? To get another round of funding so that they can hire more senior level people to take over tasks that they're not able to do. Again, to get a couple more clients so they can get validation that anybody actually wants this crap that your company is creating, right? And they're just like, "Argh." And so again, one of the things, if you go to your leaders, if they're in that precarious position, one of the things you may notice is that they do try to put you down a little bit. They do try to put you in their place because they are scared to death somebody is going to realize that they shouldn't be in their jobs. And at the point somebody thinks that they shouldn't be in their jobs, everything can go to hell. Basically, the entire company can implode on itself. And so this is just one of those things to be considering when you're going around and you're interacting with people and you're feeling insecure. Again, think about how the other people feel. Look at how they're interacting. Look at how they're dealing with things. When you say, "I'm lost," or when you say, "I don't know what to do next," do the people around you help you? or do they put you down? If they're putting you down, that most likely means that they're not confident about something. This just happens to be something that they're confident about, right? You're insecure because you don't know this thing. They're insecure because they don't know something else. And so instead of everybody being honest and being decent human beings, you get this whole pissing contest thing that happens and everything kind of goes to hell. So kind of just keep this in mind, right? If you're in an environment that's very bro, and everybody's like, that basically means the people around you actually are not confident. I think about this with it's an interesting psychology thing where people talk about what they're thinking about, right? And so like you don't think about the things that are just normal in your life, like the things that just go along in your life that you're very comfortable with. You don't talk about. You talk about the stuff that is actually at the top of your mind, right? So if you're dealing with girls or whatever, and a girl's like, I'm skinny or I'm this or whatever, that's actually what's at the top of their head. If they're talking about being strong or something, that's actually what they're thinking about, which actually shows you what they're insecure about because they're thinking about it all the time, right? The things people talk about are actually the things that you're generally most insecure about. And so again, if you're around people that are constantly saying how good they are at something and how you suck or whatever else, what's generally going on in their heads is that they suck at whatever. And they're just simply verbalizing it. So this is one of those things just to kind of keep in mind with whatever environment that you're in. And one of the things to question is whether or not you want to stay in that environment. The next thing to think about with imposter syndrome is I'm gonna say something controversial here. It's gonna be very controversial. How about just putting this out there, putting it on the table, sliding it across to you? How about you let your boss, wait for it, be the boss? This is one of the funny things. Like a lot of people don't really think about this with companies, but like being a boss is a job. Being a boss has its own sets of tasks, right? And one of the things with being a boss is herding all of those cats to go into a particular direction. One of the problems we get into in this whole world of ego, right? Thinking about myself, right? And thinking you're important and generally more important than other people is that basically you can start thinking for somebody else's task set, right? The boss is there to do boss things. You're there to do peon things. So let the boss be the boss and you be the peon, and you might actually find out things work out a lot better, right? So again, one of the things to be thinking about if you're a boss is figuring out how employees can handle stress. Right. So let's say you're the boss and you know you're about to get $10 million in funding. And so you are going to scale your company at warp speed. I don't know, maybe not 10, maybe $100 million of funding. So you're going to scale your company at warp speed. And you know, when you scale your company at warp speed, refresh cycles are going to go from years to possibly weeks. And I've seen this with companies where like data centers get ripped out like every 4 months. It's just absolutely ridiculous, right? And so one of the things that you may need to know out of your employees is how do they deal with stress? You don't necessarily need them to do the tasks perfectly, but if you give them a task that's a bit over their head, right? Do they finish the task with a smile on their face? Do they finish a task and bitch and grumble and kick things? Or do they go, and don't do anything at all? Right? So the boss might actually put you in a position that you're not qualified for, literally to see what the hell you'll do. Right? That is something that a boss might do. Now, if you're sitting there and you're like, oh, the boss shouldn't be put. And again, you start thinking for the boss, what the boss should do. You're not thinking about what you need to do. Again, you've only got so many brain cycles, right? You can only think about so many things at once. If you're hyper focused on what the boss should do and that you shouldn't be here and all that kind of thing, that's time that you're not taking to learn. That's time you're not taking to write documentation or talk to people or figure things out or whatever else. So if the boss puts you in that position, try to do the job as best as possible. The other thing to be thinking about, again, as an employee, right, there's this idea with bosses. Bosses are the kings of the hill, right? They control everything. Let me tell you something. I'm going to tell you something that bosses don't want you to know. They control so little. So little. It's funny. Employees are like, these bosses control everything. Yeah, talk with a boss sometimes. Bosses actually control very little. They're just trying to keep everything going in a direction. And so, one of the things to be thinking about, again, if you have imposter syndrome, is remember your boss can only put the employees that they have available onto certain tasks, right? Again, especially in the tech industry, right? We need to deploy, we need to build, whatever else. Here's the thing, right? Again, I've talked about this before with the hiring process. The boss or the employer is not going to hire the best. I guarantee you they're not going to hire the best. Because who knows where the best is? They probably can't afford the best. The best wouldn't want to work for them anyway. There's a whole bunch of stuff, right? The boss and the employer is going to hire the best who's willing to take the job. And so, depending on the situation, macro forces, and a whole bunch of other things, the best person willing to accept the job, might not be as qualified as people would hope for. And again, this is why you see some young people or some inexperienced people get into pretty high power positions is simply because they were the ones that were willing to take the job when it was offered. One of the things to be thinking about with your company, right, is you've only got so many employees, you've only got so much money for payroll, and so sometimes there are projects that need to be deployed. You do not necessarily have the in-house skill set currently to be able to deploy those projects. There's not enough money in payroll to hire somebody or a number of people that are specialized in that particular skill set. So the boss may literally pick the best employee for the job. And you, my unqualified schmuck, might be the best. Again, hey, you saw that sequel video 4 years ago. That's better than everybody else in the office, right? And so again, one of the things to be thinking about is when the boss gives you the job, just to do it and stop, overthinking what the boss really needs to do. When you're dealing with the boss, whether you're getting hired or whatever else, again, I always argue the whole thing is under promise, over deliver, be honest, and then do what the boss asks you to do. This is one of the things when I was a consultant, I had very loyal clients back when I was a consultant because I would sit down and I would listen to what the client wanted. And then I would tell them what they should have, and then they would tell me what they wanted to have happen, and then I would explain to them why this was a really, really, really bad idea. And then they would be like, Eli, I'm the one paying. And so I'd be like, sir, yes, sir. And then I'd go into the client and I'd be very obvious with how I'm doing all of this work. And then I'd get done with the work and the whole project would blow up. And I'd go, yeah, that's basically what I thought would happen. And from then on out, the clients would just do what I asked. Literally, what I heard from many of my clients is, I remember the last time that I told you to do something you said not to do. We're not going to do that anymore, right? But that's the thing, is bosses or clients or whatever else, they may give you tasks to do that you do not think are the most appropriate or that you might feel like is outside of your range. But at the end of the day, they're the boss giving you the work. So be honest, explain to them what you know and all that kind of stuff. But then if they hire you, just take the job and stop trying to think, for the boss. They have a position, you have a position. Focus on your job, not on their job. And the next thing to be thinking about, if you have the imposter syndrome, like, oh, everybody else is smarter than me, then one of the things you might want to do is just stop talking. Yeah, this is a skill. This is an amazing skill we used to have. There was a time period when people would shut the hell up. It was beautiful. Yeah, we don't really have that skill anymore, right? Basically, what is it? What is there the saying? Like you're as dumb as you prove yourself to be to other people, right? Everybody thinks that you're smart. until you open your mouth. Right. So one of the things to be thinking about, especially if you're in a company and you've got a lot of technology support staff, so people that know the skills or whatever that you're trying to deal with, is that many times if you just literally sit back and listen to people, you can start to understand how all these systems work. If basically you're not just always trying to throw things in. Again, if you sit back and you listen with people to people, when you have questions, when you don't understand exactly what's going on, you ask a question, you scribble down your notes, you take all those notes that you scribbled down for the day, and then you go home and then you do the research. Again, it's amazing how quickly you can get up to speed if you simply accept that you're not up to speed. You sit back, again, you listen to what people are saying, and then you don't prove to them how stupid you are. Again, one of the things to be thinking about is to be a go-getter. Right, a go-getter. That's a go-getter. That's the type of person that's gonna go up the ladder in this corporation or whatever. One of the things that people like to see is people that volunteer for work, right? Volunteer for work. Well, here's the cool thing about people who volunteer for work. Many times when you volunteer for work, you get to decide what tasks that you're going to do, right? So people like it because it shows that you're motivated because you're volunteering, and you like it because you can volunteer for the task you think there's a chance in hell that you can actually solve. It's good all the way around. And so one of the things to be thinking about as you sit there and you're listening to the projects and you're listening to what's going on is then start asking yourself, what tasks am I hearing that I can do? And again, it might be something as crappy as racking servers. Do people still rack servers anymore? Anyways, back in the day, we used to rack hundreds and hundreds of servers. It sucked. It sucked, right? So let's say you're a coder, and you got to put in this position where you need to know some database system. You don't know how the hell the database system is how it works. You know, you think it's going to take you a couple of weeks to get up to speed. You sit down at the project management meeting, and then they're talking about all this work that needs to be done, right? You know, these APIs need to be created, these microservices need to be created, Docker needs to be set up, Ansible needs to be done, and you're just like, oh crap. I knew I should have taken a look at Ansible a couple months ago. I still don't know Ansible. It's like, I don't really know Ansible well. I can barely do Docker. I don't know this database system. And then they're sitting there, they're talking about, and we need to rack 50 servers. I can do that. Monkey can do that. Yeah, I'll tell you what, I don't. I'll let you all. I feel like I'm willing to just rack some servers. But think about that. Again, you do the equivalent of racking servers, configuration files, or whatever else. And you sit there and you take your time and you rack the servers and you're listening to people and you're taking your notes and you're going home and you're doing some projects and you're playing around and you take your sweet time. Now you work, make sure everybody sees that you're working. It's like you don't work slow. Don't work slow because that's not motivated. But it doesn't mean you have to work fast. You can just work at a reasonable pace. Just slot in one server. Unpack the server, pull it out, screw on the rails, screw on the other rail, line it up, push it. Oh, no, it's a little off. Okay, just this thing. Okay, push that in. Use the little arms, the power supply. Right, you're just doing that. And, 50 servers. I don't know, God knows. Might take you a week or two. Shouldn't take you that long. But anyway, time. And it's time that you can listen. And it's time that you can talk with people. And it's time that you can play around with things. It's time that you can get up to speed. And then at the end, you're like, oh, I can now feel pretty comfortable with this database system. So after that 2 weeks, you come back, you're sitting there at the meeting or whatever, and they have some basic thing with the database system. We need to do the migration from this to that. All right, I can do migration. I can do CSV file imports or whatever. I'll take the CSV file task. Great, nobody else wants a CSV file task. You do the CSV file, you upload. You take about a week with that, right? And so do the work that you know how to do. You're pretty comfortable knowing how to do as you're listening, as you're learning, as you're going. And then it's amazing, about 2 months, you'll feel pretty up to speed. The entire time you've been working, you've been shipping solutions, you've been supporting the rest of the company, and it's good all the way around. So this is just one of those things to be thinking about, is like when you're in these situations, don't overtalk, Volunteer for the tasks that you know how the hell to do. Keep supporting, keep delivering, keep learning. And it's amazing how fast that you can then get up to speed. And as you're getting up to speed, everybody's happy because you're doing the types of work that they didn't want to do in the first place. It's kind of a win, 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 win all the way around. Now, the final thing to be thinking about with this whole imposter syndrome and the rest of it is, again, sometimes you get in with companies and the bosses are imposters and your peers are imposters and your investors. Oh, the worst thing is when the investors are imposters. That sucks. Sometimes you get in these environments where everybody's imposters. But instead of everybody being nice, normal human beings that have a decent conversation, you kind of get in this whole programmer world. Like, "Roar, I am important. And for me to be important, that means you have to be unimportant." You get into this weird authoritarian horse crap, right? That many times can end up being a very abusive environment. And so, one of the things that you have to be thinking, again, with this whole imposter syndrome all the time, is if you're going into work and you always feel like an imposter, right? You always feel like you don't belong, everybody's looking down on you, blase, 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 blase. One of the big things to ask yourself is whether or not you should actually simply get another job. Again, one of the things to be thinking about with your career is to take agency in your own career. Take responsibility for your own career. I hear this from so many of my viewers. They'll ask questions and they'll be like, Eli, what if my boss is an asshole? And so I'll sit through and I'll go through this whole conversation thing and be like, look, remember, your boss is a person. Again, your boss, their wife might have cancer. I dealt with that. Their kid may be on drugs. They may be paddling water, right? So one of the things, if the boss is an asshole, you may want to decrease your interactions with the boss, do more documentation or whatever, blah. But then people keep going on, right? This, and I've got too much work to do, and blah, blah, blah. And one of the things to be thinking about is it time for you to get another job? What's amazing is how many people are willing to stay in abusive relationships. Again, this is what you see, what you hear sometimes with wives that are beaten, right? Where they stay with the relationship because they already live in this house, because oh, my husband really loves me because I can change him, because maybe I'm at fault. Is this sounding like you at all? Oh, my boss doesn't really mean to be that mean. Oh, I can change my boss. Oh, but it's actually my fault. You know, you might be an abused wife, even if you're a guy. Anyways, right? One of the things to be thinking about is to take agency in your own life. Again, these periods of imposter syndrome should be a rather short period of time. Again, in the technology world, whether you're good at what you do or whether you're an imposter, really comes down to, do you know the skill set? And realistically, most technology skills take about 40 hours to learn. Again, whether you're learning Python or you're learning PHP, whether you're learning Active Directory, telephone systems, boy, oh, this is all crap that I've learned over the years. If you actually look at it, most of the programs at Linux, right? Most of the programs, if you go to a boot camp or whatever, it takes about 40 hours to go through the boot camp and then add on maybe 40 hours also for testing purposes or whatever if you want to get certified, right? Maybe 80 hours. So one of the things, like if you feel like an imposter and because you don't know a particular language or a particular technology, just realize within about a month, you should start feeling pretty comfortable. Again, you may not be the best, right? You may not be a brainiac or whatever, but you should start feeling pretty comfortable. If you're in this job and it's a month and you still feel like an imposter, and it's 2 months and you still feel like an imposter, and it's a year and you still feel like an imposter, again, that may truly be bad management. That may be that you work with a-holes. That may be that you work with CEOs that literally don't know what the hell to do, right? So if you're like with a startup company, there is a pivot process. Like you start with an idea and then you pivot, then you pivot, then you pivot. But the idea is at some point you should stop. Like you have this idea and there's a reason you're trying to do this. And then you realize, okay, the people aren't buying this product or whatever else. They won't buy it at the right price point. So you pivot, right? But at some point, that pivoting either should stop or it shouldn't be as severe anymore. Like if you're a company and your company is just fucking pivoting like right back and forth, right? That's a problem with management. That's a problem with the company itself. And so one of the questions that you have to ask is this the type of company that you want to stay with? Now, no, a lot of people out there, they'll be like, well, you just can't get a job tomorrow. No, but you can start putting out your resumes. Again, getting a job, doing any kind of change. If you give yourself 6 months, right? If you're like, look, I've been with this company for a year, this isn't working out. I genuinely don't feel like I belong. You start putting out your resume, you go through the interview process, you realize when you're doing the interview process, yeah, maybe you lied just a little bit too much when you got the last job, right? You might go out there and you might find a place where you actually fit in with the company and the culture and everything else much better, and you get in that environment and you feel more comfortable. And so that's the final thing that I'd say is if you really have this imposter syndrome for very long, it might actually be the job itself. So, anywho, there's a rant. There is a rant on imposter syndrome. Everybody in the tech industry gets imposter syndrome. The help desk level employees get imposter syndrome. The CIOs get imposter syndrome. And I guarantee you, your CEO gets imposter syndrome too, right? Everybody gets to a point where they feel like they don't understand what's going on and everybody else is smarter and more put together and they just want to shrivel up into a ball. The thing is, again, whether you're that help desk employee or whether you're the CEO, that is not an option. What you need to do is you need to keep coming in and doing the work and trying to get better and get to the point where you feel comfortable. Again, being honest with people. This is a tough thing in the modern world because sometimes honesty is hard. Sometimes honesty is really hard. But if you're honest with people, then they know what to expect out of you, right? If you lie to them, if you BS to them, if you shine that turd, that spit polish finish, the issue is when things go to hell, they'll be like, well, you told me you were qualified. You told me that you were confident you could do this. And then you start mumbling or whatever else. If you start from the get-go, you're like, look, I understand the basics of these systems. I don't know the system specifically. If you give me this task, I'll work my ass off to be able to deploy this. But honestly, I'm not sure I'm the best person for the job. When the boss looks at you and he goes, "Well, you're the only person I can assign that's free, so you're the best person for the job," right? If you say that, whereas again, like if you shine that turd, there might be somebody else that would be more qualified for that particular position. But because you lied, well, you got the job, and now you got to deal with the stupidity that ensues. Again, thinking about the other people and the emotional state of the other folks around you. Many, many, many people feel like they have imposter syndrome. What's really interesting in this modern world, especially with social media, is I feel like a lot of people have imposter syndrome just for existence. Like they feel like imposters just in life in general. And one thing to think about is people want to be the heroes of their own story. They want to be powerful. They want to be strong. And so if they're not doing things in healthy ways, they'll end up doing things in unhealthy ways, right? And so many times the people that are around you, if they're putting you down, if they're not teaching you, like instead of showing you what to do, they just give you crap. And that's literally all they do. That might show you how unconfident they are, and just show you you're not the only one in this particular position. And then again, just sit there and think about the career development. You should always be learning in our field. Again, I've seen this. I've seen this over 30 years. You can have people at the top of their game and then their technology becomes obsolete and they're screwed. I talk about this back when digital telephone systems went by the wayside. So we have VoIP, voice over IP. Voice over IP systems are majorly different than the old analog digital telephone systems. I knew, digital telephone systems administrators making well into the six figures, and they felt like they were kings of the hill all the way until VoIP came up and they were done. Because again, telephone systems had nothing to do with TCP/IP. They had nothing to do with Active Directory. They had nothing to do with Windows or Linux. They were their own world. They were a very specialized, complicated world that became obsolete. And here's the thing, right? You are going to get hired for the tasks that employers need filled, right? So one of the things you need to be thinking about is how, again, you spend that 15 minutes, you spend 30 minutes a day, constantly learning new things, just so when things come up in the future, you're not caught off guards, so that you can go into other things. So this is just kind of some of the stuff to be thinking about with imposter syndrome. Again, it's a completely natural thing. How you deal with imposter syndrome is going to be the most important thing. And I hope I gave you a few tricks. Few tricks. Don't worry, I feel stupid every day. It's kind of funny, like I say, it's interesting with the young people. They're like, I want to do computers so I can be smart. And I'm like, oh, don't do computers. I've been doing this for almost 30 years, and I can tell you, I feel like a dumbass just about every day. I've been dealing with this blues thing. So, anyways, there's this IoT modem. So you can do this really cool communication. So it uses, anyways, it's this modem. You can send it communication. Oh my God, I've been beating my head against the wall for like 2 weeks now. Like they have a specific design philosophy, like how they design this thing is very specific. That's not what I've seen before. How you code and interact with this thing, like it uses JSON. JSON. I know JSON. JSON's easy. Yeah, their implementation of how to use JSON, yeah, that was a new that was a new concept for me. I have just been beating my head against the wall for about 2 weeks. And now, I have to say, now I understand their design philosophy, and now I sort of understand how to code their JSON scheme or whatever else, right? And that's the thing. I've been doing this for a long time, but when you get a new product, right, it has its own way of doing configurations. It has its own way of doing talking, like I say, with these little modem, right? So one, everything that you do with it has to be in JSON. And you say it in JSON, like not just the communications, actual configurations of a modem, and simply getting responses back from the modem, that requires JSON. So, okay, that's weird. I can deal with that. But then you get into code, like so with this, it deals with Arduino. You get into Arduino, but then they have their own library. So not as only is it Arduino, but then they have their own library. And with libraries on Arduino, basically it's however the hell they wrote the library. And so they wrote their own library in this weird ass way. And so then you got to be like, okay, you got to think about everything in JSON, but then you got to think about how to build all the commands and everything and read all the commands using their weird ass way of doing everything. It's like, oh God, I felt so dumb. I felt so dumb for the past week and a half. And that's basically what your career is going to be like. If you feel comfortable, if you're a technology professional and you feel solid, you just feel solid. Yeah, things are probably going to go bad for you because that means you're not learning and not doing new things. So, anyways, there are some thoughts for you. As always, I enjoy doing this type of video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.